NBC News has learned President Biden will step aside as the presumptive Democratic nominee.
It was a problem for young voters that they had an older candidate on the ballot until he dropped out and when Kamala Harris got in there.
Team USA is being built. We will take home the gold in November.
Recent polls show Vice President Kamala Harris leading former President Donald Trump among voters under the age of 30.
Democratic operatives and some pollsters even say that they think the youth vote has been underpolled. She could be doing even better against Trump nationally than we're seeing now.
Gen Z
has the ability to really shift an election.
You know, you can't count on a generation to save you.
The Fox News decision desk can now officially project that Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
In the 2024 election, young voters didn't turn out for Democrats as expected. But Gen Z is not a monolithic voting bloc. They're far from it. We spoke with journalists, commentators, activists, experts, politicians, and voters from across the political spectrum to make sense of Gen Z's rightward shift and try to answer the question, is Gen Z's shift to the right a 2024 anomaly, or is it the future? The first Gen Z baby was born in 1997. As of 2025, our ages 13 to 28.
In many ways, if you look at when Gen Z first became voters in the electorate, they broke overwhelmingly for Democrats. If you think about what shaped them from a political perspective, they were coming of age during the Trump presidency, the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the pandemic.
I voted for Kamala Harris.
Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris.
Trump.
Kamala Harris.
President Trump.
I voted for her because I agree with a lot more of her policies and things that she wanted to implement, obviously, than I did Donald Trump. I just not a fan of Trump at all.
I'd kind of known from his 2016 run that a lot of his economics were centered on the American worker, the American people. I was a big fan of that.
Her values align more with mine. Her whole stance on gun control, a lot of more social issues like immigration rights, LGBTQIA+ rights, women's rights. I think I stood more with her.
Personally, I do like the way he handles the economy, so that is a big plus.
A lot of demographics of young people were assumed to be safely Democratic voters, and that assumption was based on a faulty premise of the past.
What we saw in 2024 was a departure from young Americans' role as a Democratic stronghold. While young voters turned out to vote less in 2024 than they did in 2020, they still voted for Harris in larger numbers than they voted for Trump. However, polls show that voters ages 18 to 29 supported Harris in 2024, 13 points less than they supported Biden in 2020.
One critical group that helped the president-elect complete his unprecedented political comeback, young men.
The left was alienating them. They were only appealing to, I think, Gen Z women through women's rights issues and trying to persuade more women to vote for them. And by doing that, they villainized young men.
The ability of conservative podcast hosts and social media influencers to set the agenda for young people and for those who are just checked out of legacy media was unlike we have seen. And I think it changed the way that politicians and campaign operatives understand the consumption or lack thereof of media in a way that it's never going to go back.
A lot of them get particularly informed through social media, through TikTok, through influencers, through podcasts. And that kind of fragmented media ecosystem allows for the rise of influencers and voices, podcast hosts, who introduce them to the manosphere.
And we also have a reputation of talking to people as if we are better than and know more and are holier than thou, and nobody wants to listen to that.
There's this Ivy League pretentiousness in the Democratic Party, I feel, where they're like, we know better, and just, you must be stupid if you don't agree with us.
Young people get their news from social media, they get their news from YouTube. Conservative, especially the male conservative influencers, they won the game on that. And they're still winning the game on that.
Joe Rogan puts out a 3-hour episode every day, and you can tell that that is raw. It is hardly edited, if at all, and they throw it out there.
Tonight, I'm going to blame you. I'm going to say I spoke to this guy for 3 hours.
The Trump campaign was really smart to send both Trump and his surrogates like J.D. Vance on shows that were really popular with male viewers. They're trying to meet male voters, I think, where they are. And I don't think the Democratic Party has necessarily done as good a job of that yet.
By and large, the main motivator behind Gen Z's shift to the right, the economy and cost of living.
The economy.
But young people are generally pressed for money. They're pressed financially. And so if they can't buy the food they need or afford the rent that enables them to live, this directly affects them, makes them unhappy. And when you're unhappy, you almost always vote against the incumbent party.
With young people, again, they were being sold a lot of information about the economy and their prospects. And I think they felt, well, maybe opportunities were diminishing under Biden and we need something new.
And here were the Democrats saying, we're working for you, and it didn't appear to, in their circumstances, the way that they were living was not being affected in a positive direction. And Trump was appealed to him, I think, on a visceral cultural level. Here's a guy who portrayed himself as a successful businessman, a deal maker. I'm going to make America great again.
One thing that Donald Trump did really well with his campaign was actually talking to Gen Z and saying, we are going to help you financially in incentivized companies bringing jobs back to America.
There's one party who is talking about and understands the fact that it's too expensive for me to live. I can't afford to take people out on a date, let alone figure out how I'm gonna get a degree and buy a home. And that's their first political experience, and that influences how they turned out to vote.
As pollsters, politicos, activists, and voters grapple with the change, it raises the question, is Gen Z's shift to the right a 2024 anomaly, or is it the future?
I think it's too soon to tell.
It's hard for me to say whether or not this is going to be an enduring change right now.
It's impossible to know where Gen Z is going to land because that will be determined by what they're offered, whether they're offered a candidate or candidates or parties and their party platforms that really speak to them and what they want in their lives to make their lives better.
It's too soon to say whether Gen Z's rightward shift is permanent, and that's because Gen Z is still evolving and coming of age. While we can't conclude how Gen Z will vote in the coming elections, here's what we can look out for to see whether Gen Z's rightward shift is 2024 specific, or if it's the future.
Democrats are having a very hard conversation over and over and over again with and among themselves to answer the question, how do we get back out of the wilderness? There is no one answer. There aren't even 10 answers to that.
The Democratic Party is kind of fracturing and having an identity crisis and figuring out what the heck do we do? The people that they're putting up on pedestals are not appealing to young men. They're not appealing to Gen Z, and they're not a unified party anymore. They don't really know who they want to put on the ticket. After Kamala Harris, you have AOC, you now have Zohran Mamdani, who's kind of become a voice. You have Gavin Newsom, but kind of all of these Democratic talking heads, I really don't think any of them have a unified front, and they're trying to figure out, okay, we've messed up, how do we get our voters back?
Looking into the future in terms of the Gen Z vote, it's really hard to know whether this trend toward having younger people, especially young men, voting more Republican is going to stand in the next couple of election cycles. I think it's really going to depend on how Gen Z feels about government's performance. But for now, I think it's a really big question mark.
Since there's a difference in turnout in presidential elections and midterm elections, it doesn't tell you everything, but it tells you a lot. What we need to look at is, first of all, how they vote in 2026, and do we see a continuing, movement among young Black, white, and Hispanic men to the Republicans, or not?
A glimmer of hope for some Democrats can be found in the winner of New York City's mayoral primary, Zohran Mamdani.
I just voted for me, and here's the thing.
Even though Mamdani won his primary in a bright blue corner of the country and against an unpopular candidate, young voters demonstrated a renewed enthusiasm about his candidacy.
One thing is clear, young voters across the 5 boroughs are changing the face of politics. According to the Board of Elections, voters ages 25 to 34 had the largest turnout.
I think it's not so much left or right. I think it's what is a candidate offering. Even just look in New York at Mamdani, he did so well for lots of reasons, but the biggest is his ability to communicate.
New Yorker, it's easy to feel like your voice doesn't matter. Politicians don't take you or your concerns seriously because they don't think you'll vote. But listen up.
And his promises that really hit the right note on affordability for people who are really struggling.
When you have something so radical, I look at his campaign and I'm like, what did he do right to get so many young voters in New York to vote for him in that election? And I look at how he spoke very candidly and very authentically to his voter base and his social media. And Gen Z is attracted to that. They want authenticity.
He won because the message resonated. Amplification of a great message across social media is a hugely powerful tool, but it doesn't matter how many views you get on a video that doesn't move people. And his commitment to making life more affordable, to seeing folks from every walk of life and saying, I'm going to fight for you. No matter what language you speak, no matter what your income bracket is, I'm going to make sure that you have somebody that's interest is you, not corporate donors, not the government of Israel, not anything else. And that's something that I think could absolutely work in Middle America.
I think broadly speaking, the establishment Democrats and like the party's most visible representatives are so feckless, so cowardly, and so inept. There's a dereliction of duty at this point, and people clearly recognize that. That's why Chuck Schumer is one of the least popular congresspersons in the country right now. I think some of the best examples of Democrats actually fighting back would be Brad Lander getting arrested. He's a New York City comptroller. He locked arms with an undocumented migrant that he was talking to at the outside of his court hearing. He saw the ICE agents coming. His wife warned him. He immediately locked arms with this person, and he got arrested in the process.
What Democrats need to do a little bit is to get a little bit more aggressive. I mean, I'm so in favor, don't get me wrong, Michelle Obama's, when they go low, we go high. I'm so in favor of that. When we don't also play defense for the sake of our democracy, for the rights that we feel as people, how on our conscience can we say, oh, we need to do what we need to do to defend our democracy?
We have to be authentic. We have to be unpolished. We have to be unfiltered. We have to feel relatable and approachable, and finding messengers that can do that is really difficult, actually. And I think that we know that this is a problem.
We have an opportunity now to say, hey, we have a vision that is very different than this, right? But what is that vision? And communicate that vision clearly and lay out an agenda that isn't just, hey, we are against Trump, but what is it that we are actually for? And if we do that effectively, I think we will win. And we will build on that coalition and not only win the midterms and win elections down the line, but send a very clear message.
Gen Z's future political leanings at this point remain unclear, but one thing remains certain. Ignoring Gen Z is not a winning strategy for politicians. If consultants, strategists, politicians, and politicos want to earn Gen Z's vote for elections to come, they must not pretend to listen to them, but understand and act on Gen Z's top priorities. And that simple act might just be the difference between winning or losing Gen Z in the voting booth.